Our next talk is by Pravrajika Virajaprana, the Ramakrishna Mission in the West. Pravrajika Virajaprana has been a nun at the Vedanta Society of Northern California since 1972. She serves the society in various capacities, including giving lectures and writing articles for the Ramakrishna Order's journals. She compiled and researched a book, Photographs of Swami Vivekananda. Pravrajika Virajaprana, please, on the Ramakrishna Mission in the West.
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon for this special occasion, and I thank Swamiji for giving me this opportunity. So my subject is the Ramakrishna Mission in the West. When Swami Vivekananda returned to India from the West for the first time in 1897, after his famous speech at the Parliament of Religions, he started the Ramakrishna Mission in May of the same year. The Ramakrishna Mission was formally registered as a separate institution from the Ramakrishna Mutt in 1909. Now the question arises, why did Swamiji wish to organize the handful of monks who had gathered around his master, Sri Ramakrishna? What was his purpose? Groups of organized monks were not the norm in India. For the most part, monks lived solitary lives, often visiting holy places. They were not organized, and they did not involve themselves in societal matters. They had left the world and its concerns and problems far behind. Furthermore, at this time in India, the country was struggling to free itself from the grips of the British Raj. Why would Swamiji wish to introduce such a conservative Western concept into a monastically free society at such a time? That Swamiji wanted the monks to dedicate their lives to the worship, to the service of God and man. In addition to the political revolutionary ideas that were predominant and popular among the bright young men in India, quite a few of whom later became sterling monks of the order, Swamiji introduced another revolutionary idea, the idea of service as worship, as we have seen in the video today. It was so revolutionary that even some of his brother monks objected, saying Sri Ramakrishna never taught them to do such work. How did Swamiji come to this apparently radical conclusion? In 1884, Sri Ramakrishna was talking to a group of devotees about the spiritual practices of the Vaishnavas. And there he mentioned that one of their practices was to show compassion to others. Sri Ramakrishna then faltered over the word compassion, saying, "Who are we to show compassion to others? It isn't compassion, but it is service to all, recognizing that every being is a manifestation of divinity." Now, Swamiji was the only one present in the room that understood the depth and the true meaning of Sri Ramakrishna's statement. He resolved then and there that if it were possible for him, that should he get the chance, he would spread this profound truth to the world at large. After Sri Ramakrishna passed away, Swamiji roamed all over India as a wandering monk. And during that time, he fully understood the condition of India, and that in spite of the common people holding on to the ancient spiritual culture, the most important need in their lives was physical sustenance, health care, and education. Swamiji felt that a person could not concentrate on seeking his or her spiritual welfare when there was such a basic struggle for existence. He saw firsthand that major parts of the country had to be uplifted materially, and also that her people had to be reminded to have faith in themselves and to have inner strength based on their spiritual heritage. To improve their economic condition, they had to be taught modern methods of agriculture, village industries, and so on. Swamiji resolved to go to America to attend the Parliament of Religions in 1893 in the hopes of raising some money so he could give a practical shape to his ideas. After his spectacular success at the Parliament and after traveling all around the country, he realized several important things. First of all, although he had been an astonishing success in the Parliament, he was not making much money speaking thereafter through his lectures. Second, he had observed how institutions and associations, as well as Americans in general, were energetic, organized, and systematic in their methods of work. They cooperated with one another. They built upon each other's strengths, and by working as a unit, were highly productive. By comparison, Swamiji felt Indians were disorganized. They were jealous of one another and often tied down by outdated caste traditions. A strong conviction eventually grew in him that no great work could be accomplished without an organization. This was the seed that took root, eventually sprouting into the worldwide Ramakrishna Mutt and mission, with the motto, Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitaya Cha, for one's own spiritual benefit and for the good of humanity. The Ramakrishna mission is first and foremost a spiritual institution based on high ideals and principles. It is not simply a humanitarian organization, although many of its activities in India fall under this category. It is a public association comprised of both monks and laypersons. Lay people assist the monks in running educational, medical, and other types of institutions. All service is rooted in what became Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy of work, which is based on the following principle: all work is sacred. As Sister Nivedita rightly said, there is no distinction between the sacred and the secular. Service to man is service to God, worship of God. Spiritual service is not restricted to a particular type of work, or is it confined to a certain time? It's a way of life. This spiritual method of work is summed up in the Bhagavad Gita. The all-pervading God is the ultimate cause of all work and the enjoyer of the fruits thereof. Hence, all work is to be done as worship and the fruits offered to the Lord. By working or serving in this spirit, the ego is attenuated. I am not the one responsible for the work. I am merely an instrument. And because I am serving God or worshiping the Lord through my work, all of it should be done as perfectly as possible. This is the ideal of the Ramakrishna mission. The Ramakrishna mission aims at the spiritual regeneration of humanity without involvement in politics or with any political affiliations. Now, with this introductory background, I would like to discuss briefly the subject, the Ramakrishna mission in the West, in 3 parts. Number 1, how Westerners were materially responsible for the establishment of the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission in India. 2, how the mission spread from India to the West. And 3, the purpose and work of the mission in the West now. It should be noted here that outside of India, there is not a clear-cut demarcation between the Ramakrishna Mutt and the Ramakrishna mission. So first, how Westerners were materially responsible for the establishment of the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission. When Swamiji was in the West, he made many friends, among whom some became his disciples, some his admirers, some his followers. And although Swamiji did not make much money through his lectures and classes, after some time, he finally obtained substantial financial help from his Western friends for his Indian work. Some of these devoted followers contributed generously even years after Swamiji had passed away. With the funds provided by one Henrietta Mueller, a big plot of land was acquired in 1898 on the western bank of the Ganga in a place called Vellore. In 1899, the monastery shifted there from its previous location in Alambazar. Within 2 years, it became a registered institution. Now, without her financial assistance, it is doubtful that Swamiji would have been able to purchase such an ideal piece of property for his monastery. Swamiji's disciple, Mrs. Sarah Bull, made a sizable contribution to help establish Vellore Mutt on this property. And in 1938, Helen Rubel, known as Bhakti, a disciple of Swami Akhilananda, who was then in charge of the Vedanta Society of Providence, Rhode Island, donated nearly the full amount toward the construction of the Ramakrishna Temple, which still stands today. Without Miss Rubel's and Mrs. Bull's munificence, the scheme of building this magnificent temple would have remained an ideal vision for many years more. Miss Rubel also donated a large amount towards a project of Swami Dayananda, who, by the way, was the brother of Swami Madhavananda, the 9th president of the Ramakrishna order. Swami Dayananda had developed a real interest in child welfare and maternity care while he was in the United States. He was stationed in San Francisco for some time. This was a new line of activity and was much needed in India. With Miss Rubel's contribution, the Sishu Mangal Pratishthan was started, and that eventually grew into the huge Seva Pratishthan Hospital in Kolkata, which is fully functioning today. And just as an aside, the Sarada Mutt and mission, when they were starting the convent in the 50s, one of the Swamis, senior Swamis of the order, appealed to Swami Akhilananda for some financial help. Again, Miss Rubel donated $40,000 in the early 1950s, which was a huge sum for the beginning of the Ramakrishna mission help of Sarada Mutt. Now, another friend of Swamiji's, Betty Leggett, who was the wife of Francis Leggett, and whose home Swamiji stayed in during his second visit to the West, she donated a large sum for the construction of a building that was intended for the use of visiting Western devotees on the Vellore Mutt campus, Again, Betty donated another substantial amount for the building of the Legate House for use by the monks. In addition to these much-needed financial windfalls, Mrs. Bull had devoted a lifetime to planning the permanent establishment of the work of the Ramakrishna Mission. Furthermore, Betty Legate's sister, Josephine MacLeod, used her flamboyant influence to improve the relations between the monastery and the government of India. She was also on hand, assisting financially whenever needed, and ran interference in a number of legal matters. From all sides, Swami Vivekananda was assisted and supported financially by these American women and painstakingly laying the foundation for the Indian work. Mention should be made here of two of Swamiji's women European disciples as well, Sister Nivedita and Mrs. Charlotte Xavier. Irish-born Nivedita dedicated her extraordinary talent and life to the uplift of India in innumerable ways. Sister Nivedita was assisted by another American disciple of Swamiji, Sister Christine, in the education and training of women. And then there was Charlotte Xavier, and an English woman and her husband, James, who founded and lived in a Advaita ashrama in Mayavati in the Himalayas, a mountain retreat that Swamiji had wished for so long to have for contemplation and meditation. Here, Mrs. Xavier and some of the monks started a publication department, which among other works began publishing the Prabhupada Bharata, an English journal of the Ramakrishna order, as well as the life of Swami Vivekananda and his complete works. Another outstanding disciple of Swamiji was J.J. Goodwin. Josiah John Goodwin was a British stenographer who is known for recording Swamiji's talks. Moreover, it is widely accepted that without his efforts, most of Vivekananda's works would have been lost. Now, clearly, all of these Westerners and many others as well laid the basis of the Ramakrishna mission. The Indian contingent would follow later. Second, how did the Ramakrishna mission spread to the West? Swami Vivekananda himself started 2 centers. During his first visit, he founded the center in New York in 1894. During his second visit, he founded the center in San Francisco in 1900. He established Vedanta in England as well. From these small beginnings, the Ramakrishna mission in the West spread. Besides Swami Vivekananda, 4 other direct monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna worked in America, and 2 of them worked in England. These 4 were Swami Turiyananda, Swami Trigunatitananda, Swami Sadadananda, and Swami Abhedananda. Now, these first-generation Swamis were followed in this country by 18 second-generation Swamis, all of whom were disciples of Sri Sarada Devi, the Holy Mother, or disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. The second-generation Swamis were sent to these countries by Sri Ramakrishna's disciples. They began arriving in 1923 and continued coming for the next 45 years. All of them started their service either in San Francisco, New York, Boston, or Portland. And slowly from these cities, the Ramakrishna mission spread to various other parts of the country, often through the initiative of local devotees and Vedanta students, and sometimes for the personal needs of the Swamis. In the meantime, Vedanta centers began sprouting in different parts of the world. As of 2022, there are 265 centers worldwide, 198 in India, and 67 centers in 24 other countries, and 44 sub-centers. Some of these countries include the United States, Europe, Russia, Canada, and South America. Third, the purpose and the work of the mission in the West now. Now, obviously, the Ramakrishna mission operates differently in Western countries than in India. The service required in Western countries is not the same as in India, where not only spiritual, but also educational, medical, agricultural, instructions in village industries, work in rural and tribal areas, and relief and rehabilitation operations during natural calamities are needed. In the West, what Swami Vivekananda observed was an existential need. Western societies and developed countries have basically already met all the challenges that India faces. The West is confronted with much deeper issues. As technologically and scientifically advanced as the West is, there is widespread spiritual deficit that has been caused by the decline of moral and spiritual values, mainly due to materialism. That is why Swamiji said that he had a message to the West as Buddha had for the East. Furthermore, for the positive reasons mentioned earlier that Swamiji saw in Westerners, their energy, their faith in themselves, their independence, democracy, freedom, and organization, he felt that the West was fertile ground for the spreading of Vedantic ideas and way of life. Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji revitalized Vedanta and incorporated the best elements of Western culture. In the West, the Ramakrishna mission, sometimes known as the Vedanta movement, teaches Vedanta primarily through lectures and classes, private interviews, retreats, the selling of religious books, and interfaith programs. Spiritual ministration and cultural dissemination are the main avenues of service. The role of individual Vedanta centers is very important in the lives of its members. In India, spirituality is part of the culture. It is interwoven in all aspects of life. The country has an ancient tradition that dates back thousands of years. Whereas in America and some other Western countries, the culture and society are just the opposite. So naturally, more attention has to be given to the building up of lives. Individuals cannot fall back on society and culture for spiritual support. The aim of this kind of service that the Ramakrishna mission provides is to enable people to find ultimate fulfillment and meaning in life within their own socio-cultural and religious setting. Atmano mokshartam jagadhitaya cha, for one's own spiritual benefit and for the welfare of humanity, is clearly the motto for both the East as well as the West. Thank you.
Speech is very interesting, at least to me. The average American woman is far more cultivated than the average American man. The men slave all their life for money, and the women snatch every opportunity to improve themselves. And they are a very kind-hearted, frank people. He knew firsthand, because he was the struggling first 6 weeks in America. He was sustained by some kind-hearted ladies, Catherine Sanborn of Boston, Mrs. George Hale of Chicago. I still can't help but thinking what would have happened if Swamiji did not come in front of Mrs. Hale's house and that's the place he chose to sit down. And Mrs. Hill saw him, came out, and took him in. I'm going to invite Pravrajika Vrajaprana now to talk about Western women in America, in Vedanta movement, Western women in Vedanta movement. Pravrajika Vrajaprana has been a nun at the Sharada convent of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, Santa Barbara, since 1977. She is the author of Vedanta, A Simple Introduction, and co-author of Interpreting Ramakrishna, Kali's Child Revisited. She is a frequent speaker on Vedanta and Hindu tradition in academic and interfaith gatherings. Pravrajika Vrajaprana, please.
I'd like to thank, first of all, Swami Chetanananda for this truly enviable invitation. I'd also like to thank all the organizers who worked very hard and all of the volunteers. When you see all these little details coming together, you realize how many people have been involved for a long time. So to you, thank you. And namaskar, and as we say in California, hi. So, I'm a California girl. In 1894, Swami Vivekananda wrote to his brother disciples, "I am really struck with wonder to see the women here. How gracious the Divine Mother is on them. Most wonderful women these." Western women played a critical role in the success and the growth of the Vedanta movement in this country, and basically in the West and in India. There are so many women that played significant roles that it's impossible to even mention all of them. But truly, without these women's devoted and truly selfless service, we would not be here today. There would not be a Vedanta movement. They were indeed blessed by the Divine Mother. There's a number of Western women who played truly outsized roles in Swami Vivekananda's life and in the growth of Vedanta. For example, Sister Nivedita, Sister Christine, Charlotte Savior. And these were incredibly courageous, valorous women. But these women lived and worked in India, and I want to spend our little time here with the women who lived and worked in America. For mostly, these women were not very well known. So our first vote of thanks here has to be to Kate Sanborn. Kate Sanborn was the first American woman to help Swamiji in his mission to the West. When Swami Vivekananda first arrived in Chicago, he discovered he needed a letter of introduction to the Parliament. Oh, he didn't know that. And it was already too late to register for the Parliament, and he was running out of money. And the Parliament wasn't going to be happening for a few more months. So this was three big problems already. But he discovered that Boston was cheaper than Chicago, so he boarded a train to Chicago. And on that train, he happened to meet Kate Sanborn. And she saw this strangely dressed turbaned man and invited him into her home, which seems rather extraordinary. To invite a completely unknown man into your home, you don't know the first thing about him, she invited him in. Well, because of her valiantly open mind, we are truly indebted to her, because Swamiji gave his first talk in America in August of 1893 to a women's club, headed by Kate Sanborn. More importantly, Kate Sanborn was a good friend to Professor J.H. Wright, who was a professor at Harvard. She introduced Swamiji to J.H. Wright, and thereby history was made, because J.H. Wright was very involved in the Parliament, and he said to Swamiji, to ask you for your credentials is like asking the sun for its right to shine. And he happened to be a friend of the man who chose the delegates, so all problems were solved. Not quite, because once Swamiji, several months later, actually arrived in Chicago, he had lost the address of the Parliament. So he slept the night in a boxcar, and he got up, rather disheveled, sat on the curb, and again, the Divine Mother made things happen through American women. Because noticing outside the window, Ellen Hale looked out, saw this turbaned, orange-clad man, and thought, he must be a delegate to the Parliament. So she was cultured and intelligent, and she invited him in. Again, rather extraordinary. She invited him into the home to stay with her 2 daughters and her 2 nieces. The daughters, Mary and Harriet, and the nieces, Isabel and another Harriet. And they, along with her husband, George, became Swamiji's American family. Their home became his home. Their home became really his headquarters in the United States. The Hale family became his family. And Swamiji wrote some of his most beautiful and revealing letters to one of the daughters, Mary Hale. He wrote her, except for your family and Mrs. Bull and the Legates and a few other kind persons, who else has been kind to me? Who came forward to help me work out my ideas? These central people in his life. Some of the most inspiring letters he ever wrote were to her. Again, he wrote her, may I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is the special object of my worship. Imagine getting a letter like that from Swami Vivekananda. Now, Swamiji's letter here mentions the Legates, and that included Frank Leggett, who became the first president of the first Vedanta society in this country in New York City, founded by Swami Vivekananda. Frank Leggett, along with Mrs. Sarah Bull, paid the publishing expenses for Swami Vivekananda's books, and that helped spread Vedanta far and wide. Thank you to the Legates. Frank's wife, Betty Leggett, and her sister, Josephine McLeod, attended Swami Vivekananda's 1895 talks in New York City, and they all became part of Swamiji's American family. Swamiji stayed with the Legates in their country home in upper state New York in what was called Ridgely Manor, now known as Vivekananda Retreat in Ridgely. And he stayed there on 3 different occasions to regain his strength, to get a new life, to get sort of a lease and a break on things. Now, Josephine McLeod, otherwise known as Tontine or Jo, played a very large part in Swamiji's work in America and the West and in India. Swamiji said about her, he said, I simply adore Jo in her tact and her quiet way. She is a feminine statesman. She can wield a kingdom. I have seldom seen such strong yet good common sense in a human being. Jo considered spreading Swamiji's message her personal responsibility, and she became a superb international ambassador for Vedanta around the world. She was very wealthy. She'd been born into high society, and she was very much at ease in high society, and she knew all the right people in all the right places, and she did all the introductions, this person to that person, to grease the wheels so that the right people could be put into the right places. She made the right wheels turn. The publication of Swamiji's books and books about Swamiji became her lifelong personal mission in life. For example, in 1935, she met Jean Hébert, and she liked him a lot. He later became a translator for the UN. She asked him to translate Swamiji's 4 yogas and inspired talks into French. She paid his way to do so. It became, of course, a success. And because of that, the following year in 1936, the Sorbonne, the greatest learning institution in France, held a meeting of a commemoration for the centenary of Sri Ramakrishna's birth. Josephine MacLeod spoke in French there for 5 minutes. Swami Chetanananda spoke there 5 minutes in English. Because of that meeting, there was able to be formed the Vedanta Society in France, otherwise known as the Centre Vedantique Ramakrishna, which had not been possible without that centenary meeting. Thank you, Josephine MacLeod. Josephine MacLeod thought that Swami Siddheshwarananda would be the exact right person in for that Vedanta center, so she contacted Swami Shivananda, and Swami Shivananda said, okay, now you're going to go to the French center. And Josephine MacLeod paid his passage over there, and indeed he was exactly the right person, and that center has flourished ever since. Josephine MacLeod also discovered Don Gopal Mukherjee, who is at Stanford, and she spoke to him endlessly about Swamiji and said, you must write about him, you must write about him. She just threw books at him, forced him to read everything. Finally, he was worn down, and his book was about Ramakrishna, The Face of Silence. Well, happily, that book fell into the hands of the French novelist Romain Rolland, who had received already the Nobel Prize for Literature. And then Josephine MacLeod visited him in Switzerland, and she got him in touch with Swami Shivananda and Swami Shokananda, so that because of that meeting, because of her intervention, Romain Rolland wrote the books, The Life of Ramakrishna and The Life of Swami Vivekananda. Being a Nobel Prize winner, that was assured an easy and vast audience. It was a real coup for Josephine MacLeod and the Ramakrishna order. Swamiji had enormous trust in her, and he felt she saw Swamiji as not her guru, but as her friend, and he related to her that way as well. He felt very free with her, and he wrote her, I'm glad I was born. I'm glad I suffered so. I'm glad I did make big blunders. Glad to enter peace. I leave none bound. I take no bonds. The guide, the guru, the leader, the teacher has passed away. The boy, the student, the servant is left behind. Sarah Bull, just like Josephine MacLeod, and they were very close friends, was born into high society, and she had the ability to make things happen. Swamiji said, Mrs. Bull and a few other ladies here are not only sincere and love me, but they have the power to do as leaders of society. Sarah Bull invited Swamiji to her home in Cambridge and to give talks, and later that year she asked him to participate in the Cambridge conferences, and it was there that he developed a remarkable friendship with the renowned William James, whose seminal book, Varieties of Religious Experience, is still used as a textbook in psychology and in religious studies courses today in colleges and universities. So Swamiji is quoted for pages in that book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. Swamiji wrote Sarah very soon after he met her, you may do anything as you please with my affairs. I will not even murmur. I regard you as my mother and will always abide by any advice you may have for me. It was actually through Sarah Bull in 1896 that Swami Vivekananda was asked to speak to Harvard at the Philosophical School. And that his talks there were then later made into the book, Vedanta Philosophy. Like Josephine MacLeod, Sarah was wealthy and generous, and she funded an enormous amount of Swamiji's mission, both in the West and in India. And just as Jo saw herself as Swamiji's friend, Sarah Bull literally saw Swamiji as her son, and he literally saw her as his mother. Not only as a mother, but he saw Sarah Bull as a saint. He told Sister Christine, she is a saint, a real saint, if there ever was one. He said she is a great, great woman, whom one to see whom it is a pilgrimage to see her. Once he was asked, what is your definition of a saint? And he said quietly, Mrs. Oli Bull, Vedanta later wrote, Swamiji's cause found a mother in Sarah Bull. No one else had her sense of responsibility, her foresight, or her wisdom. Swamiji placed Sarah Bull in charge of the new Vedanta societies. We have to remember who was coming. Swami Abhedananda, Swami Sardananda, later Swami Turiyananda, he put her in charge of it. He said, you have my implicit confidence in all works in the U.S., and I entrust everything there to you. He also placed her in charge of all of his accounts entirely, period. In 1899, he wrote her, recent developments prove that you are appointed by the Mother to watch over my life. As regards me and my work, I hold henceforth that you are inspired, and I will gladly shake up all responsibilities from my shoulders, and I will abide by what the Mother ordains through you. Now, why did he have such regard for Sarah Bull? He wrote her this, you have been the one friend to whom Sri Ramakrishna has become the goal of your life. That is the secret of my trust in you. Now, at this point, we've got to backtrack a bit because we have to thank some people who came earlier. We have to thank Mary Dutcher. Now, Miss Mary Dutcher attended Swamiji's 1895 talks in New York, and she invited him to come to her summer cottage in Thousand Island Park. He gave talks there for 7 weeks. Now, that cottage and those talks have been the gift that just keep on giving, because those talks were transcribed by Ellen Waldo, what became known as Inspired Talks. Those talks transformed people's lives then, and they are continuing to transform them even today. They were inspired talks, and they surely were. Ellen Waldo's quiet labors gave the world inspired talks. She also transcribed his talks, Raja Yoga. And Ellen Waldo was another powerful brick in American Vedanta. Ellen Waldo was the first woman that Swamiji asked to teach Vedanta in the United States. Apart from that, she cooked, she edited, she cleaned, she took dictation, she taught, she read proofs, and meanwhile, she had to commute 2 hours back and forth from where she lived to where Swamiji lived on a bus, 4 hours on a bus, just so she could serve Swamiji. Swamiji had enormous faith in her capabilities, and he wanted her to start giving Vedanta classes. He said, I will be 1,000 times more pleased to see one of you start than any number of Hindus scoring success in America, even be he one of my brethren. I mean, we're talking about the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna here. Another Sarah needs mentioning. Sarah Farmer, who was, of course, a friend of Sarah Bull, inaugurated the Greenacre Conferences in 1894 in Greenacre, Maine. Now, Sarah Farmer asked Swamiji to speak. He'd have a wider audience. And many in what was called then the New Thought movement came and attended those conferences. Now, this New Thought became our precursor to the later New Age movement, which actually got many of these Hindu ideas into general American thought and American society. Sister Devamata wrote, among the most eager students at these Greenacre conferences were a number of teachers, each with a blank book in hand, and Swamiji's words were punctuated by the tap of pencils as they were taking rapid notes. She said, not a sentence of Swami Vivekananda's went unrecorded. And she said, I am sure that if later anyone had made the circuit of New Thought, metaphysics, or divine science, they would have heard everywhere Vedanta and yoga in more or less diluted form. This is an extremely significant way in which Swami Vivekananda's thought percolated into American society and American thought without people even becoming aware of it. So thank you, Sarah Farmer. And now we come to yet another Sarah Fox. It was a very popular name, as you can tell. Sarah Fox, along with her sister Rebecca, heard Swamiji speak in Oakland in 1900, and Sarah Fox said she thought she'd heard the most wonderful thing she'd ever heard in her life. And later, she and her sister Rebecca heard him again in San Francisco. And later, they became very impressed with Swami Trigunatitananda. And even still later, they met Gurudas, later Swami Atulananda, and they went to Shanti Ashrama. And it was Gurudas who suggested to the two sisters, I'm going to India. Why don't you go to India too? And they said, sure, why not? So they spent 3 years in India. Sarah Fox and Rebecca Fox were initiated by Swami Sarananda there. And they returned after a very happy life there. After 3 years, and soon after their return, Rebecca died. But Sarah Fox plunged into the American work, and especially into spreading Vedanta in Oakland, where she held weekly classes in Oakland. Later, Swami Ashokananda, seeing the amount of interest that was events there, started giving classes there, and soon he realized there needed to be a permanent Vedanta center in the East Bay. So Sarah Fox became the driving force for starting a Vedanta center in Berkeley. And she was the founding president of that Vedanta center from 1939 to 1949. Swami Ashokananda said that she was one of the most spiritually advanced people he knew in the West. At her memorial service, he could barely control his tears, and he always spoke of her with great emotion. Now, from the Bay Area, we have to go down to Los Angeles, where we can meet the Mead sisters, who also played a very significant role in the Vedanta movement in the West and in Swamiji's life. Alice Mead Hansborough had read Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga when she was roughing it in Alaska, and she longed to meet the man who had these wonderful thoughts. Well, 2 weeks after her return from Alaska, he came to Los Angeles, so all three Mead sisters went to hear Swamiji speak, and later they met him at the house of Roxy Blodgett, who we also have to thank, who is another devoted supporter of Swami Vivekananda. Now, the Mead sister went to meet him and said, please come to our house in Pasadena. Come and stay, give teachings there. He said, no, I'm quite happy here. No, thank you, but I'm quite comfortable here. Well, a few days later, showed up at their house, dropped his bag, and he said, I'm here to stay. And of course, they were delighted. And soon he was giving classes both in Pasadena and in Los Angeles. And the sisters decided they were going to start Vedanta groups, both Vedanta centers, both in Pasadena and Los Angeles. And they told Swamiji, and Swamiji said, it won't last. And it didn't, but the seeds were sown, because 30 years later, the first Vedanta Society, or actually the only Vedanta Society of Southern California, was founded in the home of Carrie Mead Wyckoff, Alice's sister, who had been one of the Mead sisters. Later, she was known as Sister Lalita. So after 3 months in Southern California, Alice Mead Hansborough went with Swamiji up to San Francisco, up to Northern California, for more lectures, and he worked himself to death there. Now, Alice there became his secretary, his housekeeper, his bookkeeper, and his banker. And Swamiji said, Mrs. Hansborough, he said, the second of the Mead sisters, she is here, and she is working to help me. He said, Lord, bless their hearts. He said, seeing such souls repays for all the nonsense of this life. Alice kept the fire of Vedanta alive in South Pasadena, in Los Angeles, and in San Francisco. Swamiji wrote the three sisters, you three sisters have become part of my mind forever. Alice's sister, Carrie Mead Wyckoff, suffered a great loss in 1929 when her only son, Ralph, who had lived with Swamiji and stayed with Swamiji in Pasadena when he was there, met with a terrible accident. He was buried in a landslide. And for 3 days, he lingered and lingered. And on the third night, Swamiji, Carrie Wyckoff, Sister Lalita, had a dream where Swamiji was walking ankle deep or knee deep in the ocean water, carrying him across to the other shore. And she realized then that her only child, Ralph, had died. So it was a terrible time for her. She was very depressed, had a hard time recovering from that. 3 years later, she went up to the Vedanta Society up in Portland and met Swami Prabhavananda there. And she instantly felt this pull to this young Swami who she felt was like her son. And he also felt like she was his mother. So she invited him to her house in Hollywood to start a Vedanta Society there. And Swami Prabhavananda contacted Swami Shivananda about it. And Swami Shivananda said, yes, you start the Vedanta Society there. So he did. And everyone who knew her, and her name was by then Sister Lalita, knew her to be a saint. The first night that Swami Prabhavananda spent the night there, he had a dream of Holy Mother walking up the stairs, going up through the lawn up to the Mead house, her house there. And he said that was, of course, a good sign. And then once he asked Sister Lalita, when she was prostrating in the shrine in the temple, she took sometimes a very long time during her prostration. He said, "Sister, why are you prostrating so long?" And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but sometimes it takes me longer to see the light." She thought that everybody saw the light when they prostrated, but she had to wait a little longer because she was kind of running slow on it. Roxy Blodgett remembered that in Los Angeles, Swamiji was asked, "Swami, who is it that supports the monks in your country?" And Swamiji answered in a flash and said, "The same who support the clergy in your country, madam, the women." And so it has been. And so it has been. We are profoundly grateful to all those unsung, hardworking, divinely inspired women who have worked at every single Vedanta center in this country and throughout Europe. Every single one of them without exception. The Vedanta societies could not have survived, let alone thrived, without these women. Swami Satprakashananda remembered that once he was on a train, it was when he had first arrived in this country, I think, and the work here was very difficult. And the train was late, and he was exhausted, and he was thinking, why have I come here? And when the train finally pulled in, he saw two women standing there waiting for him. And he thought to himself, this is why I've come. This is why I've come. So thank you to all the unsung heroines who support all this work. So to Krista at the Gret Center, Swami Ritajnana said that she was Sri Ramakrishna's gift to him. Thank you, Krista. And also thanks to Jean Genet, who kept the West Side Center of New York going, and the East Side, Dorothy Kruger, Margaret Woodrow Wilson, and the Countess. Let's not forget Helen Rubel in Providence, who made Bellarmont possible. Let's also not forget Mrs. Vera Edwards in Portland, and also Constance in Seattle. Here in Vedanta Society, Virginia Ward, Ruth Peterson, Wanda Ellis, and so many others. In San Francisco, Edie Ben Soleil, Joe Stansbury, Helen Sutherland, so many others. In San Francisco, in Sacramento, Jean Wyatt, Cleo Anderson, and the indomitable Gladys Harvey in Berkeley. In Hollywood, Amia, Ella Corbin, Sudhira, Helen Hall. Throughout the West, there have been so many unsung heroines who worked so hard, who gave their time, they gave their dedication, and truly they gave their hearts to grow these Vedanta societies from the ground up. They gave their hearts to Vedanta, to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda. To them our thanks and our salutations again and again.
Thank you, Pravrajika, for telling us all the stories. It was very interesting. Now we are going to hear from St. Louis's very own, our own Swamiji, Swami Chetanananda, a renowned scholar, writer, and orator. He is with us in St. Louis since 1978 as the minister of the Vedanta Society of St. Louis. Swami Chetanananda has written, edited, translated many important books on Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Holy Mother, and Vedanta, and lectured extensively on Vedanta philosophy. I don't have any audacity to introduce Swami Chetanananda. Rather, I would share one stanza of a poem which appeared right after Swami Vivekananda's speech. This stanza reflects how the common people in America saw and understood Swami Vivekananda's lecture. The poem was titled Aunt Hannah on the Parliament of Religion, and there is the dialect for it. Then I heard the handsome Hindu monk dressed up in orange dress, who said that all humanity was part of God, no less. And he said, we was not sinners. So I comfort took once more, while the Parliament of Religions roared with approving roar. Swami Chetanananda ji, the magnitude of Ramakrishna mission. Swamiji, please.
सर्वे सन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from disease. May all realize the good, and may none be subject to misery. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be to all. My topic, the magnitude of the Ramakrishna mission. I was listening to the beautiful lectures of different speakers. They covered most of my points. I have nothing to say. I am really happy that you have come to participate in this remarkable, memorable function. As you remember, in 2018, we observed Swami Vivekananda's appearance at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. I am very grateful to the Hindu temple and our friends and admirers and volunteers to arrange this function. Sri Ramakrishna was a unique religious personality in the world who realized God in Hindu way, then practiced Islam, Christianity, realized God. After realizing God in different paths, he proclaimed as many paths, as many faiths, so many paths. Do not quarrel about religion. Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna's disciple, came to America in 1893. What David often made a remarkable statement that America is the country, first country, who brought all religious leaders on the same platform. It never happened in the religious history of the world. That is a significant remark. That is harmony, unity in diversity. which is the core of the Vedantic philosophy. You know, this thing happened after Sri Ramakrishna, 1836 to 1886. Swami Vivekananda makes a remark, within 7 years after my master's passing away, his idea encircled the globe, harmony of religions. Some of my previous speakers made wonderful remarks about that thing. It is something unique, beautiful. I remember in 1976, I went to attend the bicentennial function in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. There was an exhibition. There are 29 pavilions. The foreigners who came to America and contributed to American heritage. Vivekananda was the only person from India. I saw that exhibition. American people appreciated Swami Vivekananda's contribution. Sometimes I tell people, before Swamiji left for America, left for India, he lived in this country for 5 years, on 2 times. Do you know what he left? He left 4 yogas. Karma yoga, Jnana yoga, Bhakti yoga, Raja yoga. These are the 4 ways you can go to God. Look what Christ said. Love thy Lord with all thy heart. Bhakti yoga. All thy soul. That is Jnana yoga. All thy mind. That is Raja yoga. All thy strength. That is Karma yoga. Houston Smith told me, Swami, Jesus also told 4 yogas. Vedanta came to America through Swami Vivekananda. He says, I have a message to the West as Buddha had a message to the East. What was the message? Vedanta. One thing which comes to my mind, could you sum up? Swamiji says, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity by controlling nature, external or internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control, by one or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrine, dogmas, rituals, and nothing but secondary details. We say that inner part of all religions are the same, but external parts differ. It doesn't matter. Now, my second point. Ramakrishna mission, started by Sri Ramakrishna himself during his lifetime. It was in 1886, Sri Ramakrishna said that you cannot show compassion to the people, only you can serve. Serve human beings as God. Swami Vivekananda found the practical Vedanta in that speech. I shall tell you what is that practical Vedanta. Swamiji was in Thousand Island Park in 1895 in New York State on the St. Lawrence River. I went there a few times. We have that Vivekananda cottage. Swamiji was thinking, organize or not to organize? If I organize, the religion, the spirit will diminish. And if I do not organize, the message will not just spread. Swamiji was very much impressed seeing the organization capacity of the Western people, especially American people. They know how to organize. Otherwise, it will be one-man show. The moment that person dies, it goes. Organization is very, very important. But human beings are not perfect. So their imperfections enter into organization and pollute the organization. That is the reason Vivekananda put all safeguards to the Ramakrishna mission. There is a rule book of our monastery. In 1897, Swami Vivekananda returned to India and he reawakened India If you read his lectures from Colombo to Almora, he regenerated India through religious lectures. Finally, he inaugurated Ramakrishna Mission 1st May 1897. Why? Why did he start? During his itinerant days, Swami Vivekananda saw there are millions of monks in India. What are they doing? Bhagavatam says, Prayana deva munaya sabumukti kama maunam charanti bijane na pararthanishta. Which is often we see some sages are practicing spirituality, austerity, in silence and solitude for their own liberation. They do not care for others. Selfish. That Swamiji did not like it. He said a person cannot meditate 24 hours. I shall take the energy of the monastics. Let them first, Atmanamokshartam, let them liberate themselves, focus their spiritual life aside, and then remaining time serve others. Serve human beings as God. Here I shall have to tell a little philosophy to you. Now there are 8 billion human beings in this planet. And here is the sun. Here are 8 billion cups of water. And there is only one sun. What do you see? You see 8 billion reflected sun. That reflection is called Chidabhas. Reflection of consciousness. So all these human beings you see, they have that mind, intellect. They are the Atman, that pure consciousness is reflecting. That consciousness reflects on the body, ground, on the street, car, everywhere. But maximum reflection we find in the mind, in the intellect. Why? When there is a lightning, that lightning glitters everywhere. But maximum reflection comes on the glasses. So that is called Chid Jad Gunti, or the consciousness and the unconsciousness means. Without consciousness, we are all dead. It is that consciousness animates the body, mind, senses. That consciousness is God according to Vedanta. That is called democratic conception of God. America is a wonderful country. It's a country based on democracy. You see, these two things are in the blood of American people. Freedom and democracy. America's goddess is Statue of Liberty in New York. And democracy. America will never tolerate the dictator. So Vedanta teaches those two things. Democracy, each human being is a God, and the goal of Vedanta philosophy is liberation, freedom, mukti, jivan mukti. So Vedanta is a wonderful opportunity to work in the West, especially in America. Swamiji wanted to divert the energy of human beings. Swamiji said, you people who feed you, monks do not earn money. It is householders. You people earn money and feed us. I must give something to you. I must share my wisdom, my spirituality. Give and take. This is the law. That's Swamiji wanted. Ramakrishna Mission, or Dr. Naidu and other, Rajinikanth, all these people mentioned about the activities Ramakrishna Mission doing. Huge organization. Always remember, it is not one-man show. Another point I shall tell you, which is what is the difference between service of the other religions and the service of Ramakrishna Mission? Look how it works. this service attitude among the Christians, Catholics, Protestants, tremendous service. I go to interfaith, I see how much work they do. Every religion, in Buddhism, a lot of this compassion. But do you know what is their attitude? As I understand, their attitude is, you are suffering, I have compassion for you, I am serving you, you must be grateful to me. And doing this compassionate service, I shall go to heaven. Or I shall attain Nirvana. So you must be grateful to me. Vedanta is just the reverse. I am very grateful to you that you have given me a chance to serve you. You are the master, I am your servant. I am your servant. That is the Vedantic attitude. Not that I am higher, you are lower. It is I am lower, you are higher. Serving human beings as God. That Swamiji taught us. It is something, that it is an ancient philosophy, but how we demonstrate. Let me tell you one incident. I was in Boston, Swami Sarvagatanandaji, he was originally from Andhra. He was telling me about his joining the Ramakrishna order. He walked 1,000 miles from Bombay to Hardwar, Concord. His guru, Swami Akhandananda, told him. So he went there. Swami Kalyanananda, Swamiji's disciple, asked him, "Hello, young man, what do you want?" "I want to be a monk." "Really?" "Yes." Let me tell you one thing. When you go to the temple, what do you do? All these people go to the temple, do you know what do? They do three things. They do puja, they naivedya, fruits, sweets, they offer to the deities, and they pray. These three things all these people do in our temple. And in this hospital, three things. Sheva, there you do the puja. Sheva, service to these patients, living gods. Second, there you offer food. Here, Aushat Potto, medicine and diet. There you pray. Here, duty mysticota, say few sweet words to these patients. If you can reconcile these two, join here. That penetrated inside me. That is called practical Vedanta. Amazing how these things go, Let me tell you another significant incident, how the Ramakrishna mission started. 1st May 1897 it was started officially. It was most probably in the middle of 1897. Swami Akhandananda, his picture was there when we are showing the video. Do you know what happened? Ramakrishna mission started with a it is a 14 years old Muslim girl. Ramakrishna mission started with a Muslim girl, 14 years old. It was in Daudpur, in Murshidabad, West Bengal, India. Swami Akhandananda went there, and that part of the country was suffering from famine. And this girl, crying on the street, a pitcher under her arm, lower part broke, all water gone. And she was crying. And in India, generally, when you see a monk, they go, "Father, my mother will beat me. Father, my mother will beat me. We are poor. We have no food at home. We have 2 earthen pots for cooking and 1 earthen jar or pitcher to fetch water. My pitcher broke. My mother will beat me, Father." The Swami had 4 annas in his pocket. With 2 pies, he bought 1 pitcher and gave to that girl. And 2 pies, he bought some puff rice and gave to that girl. That is the beginning of the Ramakrishna mission. With a Muslim girl, 14 years old, crying on the street. Then when Swami went further, some young children, they say, "Father, we are hungry, we are hungry." He had 3 annas more in his pocket. 4 annas means 1 dime, 1 quarter. In America, we shall understand 1 quarter. That was in his pocket. So he bought some puff rice and distributed. He went further. Another lady came, Father, Goya Vaishnavi is dying. Please help, help, Father, help. Well, what can I do? He had some kind of. Then he went and saw that lady. Then Swami went to somebody's house, bought him, baked some food. You see, in India, if you have ochre cloth, you have access. I can approach anybody because we are all beggars. So he bought some food and then got a cloth also from somebody because that woman was full of filth and all those things. He wanted to clean that woman. That lady says, Father, that I can do. You brought food and cloth, that is enough. Then that woman is telling, my son, you are my son in my previous life. Oh, no, not previous life. In this very life, I am also your son. Ramakrishna Mission started. Two disciples of Swami Vivekananda was in Banaras. Many old people, Hindus, go to die in Banaras. They have this faith that if I die in Banaras, I will get liberation. So one old lady was dying on the sidewalk. Swami, so these two young men picked that woman, cleaned her, and bought a little milk and some food for her and saved her life. Now Ramakrishna Mission Home of Service, huge hospital in Banaras. It started with foreigners. Then came plague, horrible plague in Calcutta. Sister Nivedita, Margaret Noble, Swamiji's Irish disciple, Chetanananda, they started cleaning the street. Then insecticides, all these things, they tried to save the city so that people may not run away and take care of themselves. I'm just telling you that how Ramakrishna Mission started. Now we have a big relief department wherever there is any natural calamities, famine, war, then drought, flood. Dr. Naidu mentioned tsunami. Ramakrishna Mission monks will be there. They help. If you ask me, Swami, what is your philosophy? Well, I came to Ramakrishna Mission when I was 14 years old. In 1950, I was in 8th grade with half pant, half shirt. Then I finished my education, then came to the monastery in 1958 as a proofreader and editor. Then I officially joined in 1960. Till 11 years I worked in India. In 71 I came to Hollywood, 7 years in Hollywood, and 44 years in St. Louis. What I learned? I went to the training center in Belur Math. The monks I was telling, do you know, brother, I have a philosophy in my life. If you work, you will die. And if you do not work, you will die. Better work for the Lord. That is my philosophy. Blessed am I that I got a chance to serve American people last 52 years and 11 years in India. It is all Sri Ramakrishna's and Vivekananda's ideal. Their message we carry. Love people, serve people. Love people, serve people. Thank you very much.